Hi, this is Matt Hawkins, and you're listening to the Matt Balaker podcast.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you once again for tuning into the Matt Balaker podcast. It makes my day. And if you want to get extra credit, please click subscribe, tell your friends, tell your acquaintances, tell that high school friend you haven't talked to in 30 years that you're listening to the Matt Balaker podcast. It'll make my day. Well, we have a gift today because today's guest is fantastic. He's a thought leader and a gentleman. He's a Texas Longhorn who enjoys Florida weather. He's a visionary in the cannabis industry and has great hair. He's a founder and managing principal of Entourage Effect Capital, a venture capital firm focused specifically on investing in the legal cannabis industry. Please join me in welcoming Matt Hawkins to the program. How you doing, Matt?
Great. What an introduction. I'm not sure I've ever had such kudos thrown my way for really no reason.
Well, there might be more than no reason, Matt. I mean, you're quite humble, and we can unpack that, during this episode. But I want to begin with, when did you get the entrepreneurial bug?
I've had it for quite some time. Let's see. I kind of started toying with stuff on my own back in the .com days. I had back in '99, a buddy of mine and I started a IT outsourcing firm where we were using programmers from Mumbai in India. And so that was kind of the start of it. And since then I've primarily been on the buy side entrepreneurially. I've raised funds on my own, had a distressed debt fund, messed around with multifamily, did some single family residential fix and flips in bulk during the Great Recession. And then, we sold that multifamily situation, and that led me to what I'm doing now in 2014, which, it still feels entrepreneurial and startup-y, even though we've been doing it for 9 damn years. So
yeah, no, I mean, that's like 90 years in cannabis world, I think. But I want to rewind just a little bit. So you got into real estate investing. And that's a very tangible asset. It's been around since pretty much the history of the world. And then you decide to join the burgeoning cannabis industry in 2014. Why?
Well, it started on the real estate side. I started looking at real estate debt opportunities, like hard money type loans, and one of the areas that I was seeing deal flow was in Denver, Colorado, with warehouse owners looking to refinance their mortgages out of commercial debt into private debt, which would then give them the ability to lease their facilities to legal growers. They couldn't do it with a commercial mortgage because of the federal legality. And so they were paying 12 to 13%, maybe 15% yields back then.
Wow.
And I actually made a loan on one piece of property. It was a warehouse in Cherry Hills area of Denver. But I had, kind of my luck and timing moment, as I call it, was thinking that the yields would likely dry up. But if I could figure out how to underwrite the cannabis assets themselves, I would have a first mover advantage on a private equity side. And so that's what we did, and did fund one of my own, partnered with two others who'd been doing the same thing for fund two and forward. And here we are with, we just closed out our third fund.
Well, yeah, congratulations. And I think you're being quite modest, Matt, because 2014 was a different time. I mean, you're a pioneer, and they say, as the old saying goes, a lot of pioneers get arrows. So you kind of summarized it pretty clearly. You lent money to this firm in Colorado, but that you were one of very few people doing that. Like, please, like, tell our audience, like, what was the climate like? I mean, you could have been doing a lot of things, and now you're in this.
I mean, look, I got real lucky in that I had a couple of large investors in Fund One that really supplied some, to put some meat on the bone, so to speak. And then all of a sudden we were thrust into this situation where we were investing capital in the industry. And we, just like now, didn't have enough money to go around. And nothing's changed. Even though our funds have gotten bigger, there's still not enough capital in the space because of the federal legality. Institutions not in the game yet. And so that's been the hardest part, is, picking the winners and losers, because we are one of the few folks that provide equity capital to the space. I mean, the players haven't changed a whole lot. There's still a handful of equity guys and gals in the space. And it seems like the ones that have had the staying power are the ones that are still, active. But it doesn't make it any easier. In fact, it's getting harder because there's fewer people willing to commit dollars to the space because of just the hardships that the industry has endured in the past 2+ years now.
Yeah, I mean, that's an important point, Matt, because to outlookers, they might say, like, well, if there are fewer people investing and you have some money, you have more buying power. But in the cannabis world, I don't know if that's true, because I mean, you can't put all your capital to work in each deal. You want to have other financial partners.
It's still true, but you just wish you were the group that had pick of the litter, and we wish we could go out and raise $200, $300, $400 million to take advantage of what we think is the absolute best time to be investing in cannabis, because you're getting pricing right now that's as close to rock bottom as it can get. Granted, there's still a lot of hiccups that are in front of us, a lot of hurdles ahead of us, in particular, Section 280E of the federal tax code. It's so penal that it's in some cases impossible to do business. And the fact that there's no interstate commerce makes that, the supply chain tricky. But, the industry has survived, in some cases thrived and grown. I mean, this is still one of the fastest growing industries in the space. And hell, we haven't even really reached the point of pure, ending of prohibition. So there's a lot more upside out there. We just got to continue to weather the storms and let this shake out. And there will be consolidation. There will be opportunities to make a whole lot of money. We just got to be very selective about how we do it.
Yeah. And I mean, you bring up a lot of good points, Matt, and I'm no Warren Buffett, but I think generally speaking, I would prefer to invest when valuations are depressed than when they're overinflated. And
sure,
we're certainly at a period. I mean, gosh, I remember, call it 2017. It seemed like companies were trading, maybe it was like 40 times revenue. I mean, just these ridiculous kind of .com-esque valuations, but that's also when everyone wanted to join. I mean, it seems so counterintuitive. It's like, oh, this thing's going up all the time. Let's buy more of it. I mean, like, was that your experience?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's you don't realize it at the time. I mean, obviously, we were investing a lot of money back in 17, 18, and even 19. And let's face it, that was the peak of the market. But you don't. It's almost impossible to take yourself out of that world and realize and have the premonition to know what's coming. You're still looking at even back then, the growth opportunities that were just off the charts, from a returns profile standpoint. What has happened, though, is that the illicit market has proven to be a much, much more difficult animal to tackle. The not getting any help from regulatory or taxation angling from either the states or the federal government has just made it very, very difficult. And only the stronger are going to survive. And a lot of our theme right now is to find companies that we can build scale around to get them prepared and propped up for some type of legislative event that'll happen. It's going to happen in the next 3, 5, 10 years, which is not, if you think about it, it's not a whole lot of time.
No, really. I mean, I remember very vividly, Matt, this was, I think, in 2020, I believe, after there's this blue wave, all these cannabis stocks were going off the charts. It just seemed inevitable that if it wasn't safe banking, there'd be some descheduling, some major legislative event at the federal level. Both chambers, the president, they're all kind of presumably on the same team, and it didn't happen. Why not? What do you think?
I honestly can't answer that. I wish I could answer that. It was quite disappointing. I mean, the Democrats controlled, the legislative and the executive branches, and they didn't get shit done. And they kept saying they were going to. And, it's funny. Bill Maher said something over the summer that I thought was quite poignant, even though Bill's a notorious far left guy, but since COVID, he's kind of come a little bit towards the center because this isn't my Democratic Party that I grew up with.
No.
And what he said was, and by the way, Republicans say the same thing about their party too, but what he said was that if the Democrats aren't careful, the Republicans are going to steal the cannabis issue right from them. Yeah. And if they were smart, they would. Because if you think about it, it's revenue and states' rights. At the end of the day, it's all it is. It already exists. It's a transformation of a market. There's no reason for it not to be there. And you're going to reduce crime. You're going to, tamp down illegal operations that are there already. I mean, I wish I could get an audience of far-right individuals to really hear their solid arguments about why not to do this, because there's no way they could make sense to me. And I'd love to hear what their positions are, because I frankly don't know. Yeah. And by the same token, I don't know why Democrats absolutely have to have social equity when it comes to business deals. I'm all for social equity, but it's two separate issues.
Yeah,
treated as such.
I think it was maybe the Cannabis Investing podcast. There was a woman on there who was a very staunch social equity advocate, and her main talking point, and it resonated with me, was that in order for all these wonderful programs to happen, companies have to be able to make profits.
Yeah.
And so it's from these profits that you can hire more, you can invest in the community, you can grow, you can create better paying jobs. But you can't do that if you have all these headwinds and you're in a regulatory framework
and you can't,
that's counter to making money.
And she's spot on. And I agree with her wholeheartedly. The other thing you can't do is have programs set up like New York was trying to do, and it's, and some of the other states have done it too, is basically giving convicted criminals a better opportunity to get licenses than just your average guy working hard on the street who's never been convicted of a crime in his life. Yeah. That makes no sense to me.
I mean, I think this is a classic example, and I'm no expert of the path to hell is built in good intentions. I think there's an idea, the argument is there's a lot of social wrong, just a lot of wrongs have been done with the war on drugs. And that's a whole other episode, Matt. We could go on for hours about that.
And I agree with all of that.
But you can't correct it immediately. And sometimes in trying to right the wrongs of the past, you're disadvantaging so many people for a better future. And it's like, I've used this analogy before. Cory Booker comes to mind. I think his heart is in the right place when it comes to a lot of the improvements he's making. But when I was younger, I played basketball, and sometimes you'd meet with your friends, and if I got fouled or if I didn't like it, I would threaten to take my ball and go home. And I kind of think Booker and a lot of politicians kind of have that attitude. It's like they have a power they have our ear right now. And the second major legislation is passed, that power goes bye-bye.
That's right.
I mean, am I oversimplifying it, or what say you, Matt?
No, and I think that ultimately, this is where, and I've been saying this for the past 6 months or so, is that our firm and me in particular, I'm just going to be a little more vocal politically on from a lobbying standpoint, because that's the only way this is going to advance the ball. And the reality is that if we don't do that and we don't express to these politicians that their constituents want this, I mean, 2/3 of Americans live in a state where it's at least robustly medically legal. And I think the latest Gallup polling is over 70% want it federally legal. So at some point, they're going to have to listen to the damn people that are electing them.
Right.
And I just sometimes think they don't understand that. But when they do, it's like the switch is turned on. And so the sooner we can get them, thinking in those terms, then I guess that's when we're going to see some action, but it's not quite there yet.
Yeah, like a good friend of this program, Xander Abrams, had a line. He's a cannabis policy expert. He said, "You can't build an army the day you need it." And I think you're hitting on that, Matt. Is like there needs to be a lobbying effort, and I think a lot of cannabis professionals have been, frankly, too polite, too quiet, in raising concerns. But I want to change gears just a little bit. Obviously, we have a lot of challenges when it comes to legislation, but if we could just forget that for a moment, and in this hypothetical world, Matt, I'll give you a magic wand, and you can either create a law, you can get rid of a law in drug related, and it doesn't have to go through the usual legislative procedures. What would you do?
Gosh. Oh my gosh. I think the first thing I would do is do something like I still think the best piece of legislation that doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell in passing is something like the States Act. Mm-hmm. And that's just leaving it up to the states. Leave it up to them, but removing the federal illegality, veil of illegality, and let the states decide. And that way there's not interstate commerce right away, because that's going to be really, really, really hard to enact. You're going to have, states from both coasts that are just, raising cane to determine, how they keep their cultivation revenue in state. That's going to be really hard. But this would overcome that, and this would allow 280E to go away, for example. This would allow for companies just to operate in a way that could reduce pricing, just bring the whole supply chain costing down, and compete at the illicit market almost overnight. That to me is the simplest way to do this. It's kind of like what Nancy Mace has proposed. The representative from South Carolina, who's Republican, by the way. So that's kind of the route I would take.
I like it. And I live in California, and on one hand, we were one of the first states, I think the first state, to have medical use in 1996, I believe. Yeah. So I want to give credit where credit's due, but we also have, I think, the 7th largest economy in the world, and I voted, as did a lot of Californians, for adult use, thinking it would take power away from the illicit market and move it to the legal market. Now it's like the perfect storm of just embarrassment. I really think California is stumbling over itself. It created its own monopoly, and it's still doing a piss poor job making money from it, because it's an environment where it's very easy to grow, but the illicit market is thriving. I think in large part, Matt, because the tax burdens are so high. I mean, there's taxes at the municipal level, the state level. There's just this patchwork of just idiocy, in my opinion, when it comes to tax laws. You're obviously well invested in California. What do you think are the major pitfalls to what we've done here?
Where do I start? It's to me, it feels like the regulatory agency in California is not your friend. Mm-hmm. They are out to get you. It doesn't matter what you're trying to do, but if you're not current on your taxes, we're going to kick your ass out type stuff. It just doesn't make any sense to me. If they would just spend their energies on helping us convert the illicit market, they'd have more money in their pocket, their tax coffers.
Right.
It's very simple. You reduce the cost basis and tax basis on those where it's legal, and in turn, that part of the industry, that part of the supply chain will reduce their pricing and drive it back to the consumers. The consumers will go to the stores as opposed to going to the street corner. Mm-hmm. And guess what? You then have a larger revenue base, and the illicit market goes away, and you're starting to slowly transform that $3 to $5 to $6 billion worth of revenue that's sitting there that's done illicitly and not paying the state a dime.
That's a good point.
Treat us as partners as opposed to your enemy, and we can make great things happen.
But, yeah, and that's the path of lesser resistance. Like I saw some proposal from California suggesting that, all right, well, we need greater enforcement. Like that's the problem. Like we need more cops out there banging on doors and burning grows.
I'm not opposed. I mean, I do think there needs to be some level of enforcement to shut down the illicit operations. Mm-hmm. I totally agree with that. And I think that there has to be an investment at the state level to make that happen. And it's incumbent upon the industry to show what the return on that investment could be by the transformation of that industry, of the illicit market, and on a percentage basis, and what those real dollars could be. Mm-hmm. Because that's one thing that's amazed me beyond no end since I've been in this business, is that it's a transformation of the market, not a creation of one. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's weed smokers and eaters and drinkers of cannabis all over the world, and California right now is the epicenter of it, but yet only half of the market's been converted.
Right. It seems like such a simple fix. I mean, there's an argument for enforcement, but I suggest if you lower the taxes, then it's just a simpler solution. I think it's a combination of both. I mean, I agree with you. I just think that it would just make it an easier it was a seamless transition to lower taxes, help with some of the enforcement, mm-hmm. make that happen quicker, and then I think there's revenue to be had at the state level. Oh, definitely revenue to be had, and I don't want to focus too much on California, but in the last few years, Arizona's come online. Yeah. Northeast, Oklahoma, obviously Florida was a pretty early adopter. Michigan, I mean, it's just wait a few moments, and another state will hop on board. What states, in your opinion, Matt, have been either the best or the least bad when it comes to implementing cannabis policies?
Florida's been very good, I think. Even Massachusetts has done a pretty nice job. They've had some hiccups, but it's been a pretty nice job. Illinois has been kind of a mess. New York's a mess. California's a mess. Arizona's been pretty seamless. Colorado is, everybody learned like the sins of the firsts, and Colorado had the strategy of throwing crap on a wall and see what would stick from a licensing standpoint. And so now the streets are littered with worthless licenses. In the limited license states, that's not the case, and there's real value to investing your money and getting a license. It becomes an asset once you get it, and so that's the risk that we look for in operators to take that risk with their own capital or their angels' capital, and go out and work hard and get that license, because then that's worth something.
Mm-hmm. And what are some specifics? Pick a state: Arizona, Massachusetts, Florida, of things done right. I
mean, really, it starts with the limited licensing concepts, and then staging in additional licenses as the market needs it. Having too little or too many licenses is a recipe for disaster.
Okay. And since 2014, you and Entourage Effect Capital have invested in over 70 transactions.
Yeah, around there. It's crazy.
What are some of the big lessons you've learned from all those deals, Matt?
Wow, where do I start with that? Well, for sure, the largest lesson we learned early on was that there's not enough money. The companies always need more money than you have for them. And if a business plan tells you they only need $1 million, you better multiply that by about 5. And so that's been hard to, marry that with what operators believe vis-a-vis how much money is available to them.
Okay.
And that's continues to be a problem. That's probably the biggest thing. The second thing is that never, ever, ever shortcut and underwrite on the operating team. I mean, the operators they have to be world-class. They have to be, exceptional from a track record standpoint and from an ethical standpoint. And if you ever cut corners on that, it's going to burn you.
Okay. So if someone were looking to get into the cannabis industry, what skills would you suggest that they learn?
Well, I don't think there's, the reality is that the industry isn't too dissimilar from the supply chain is similar to a lot of different, industries like CPG and obviously alcohol and tobacco. And so a lot of successful operators have been in that space, and retailers, and it's just a matter of, if you're in the cultivation space, that's probably getting your arms around that is a little bit tricky because that's a finicky plant.
Mm-hmm.
But everything else is, a lot of it's just business sense. And, we found that some of our most successful operators, the ones that are, the most agile and savvy, just from a business standpoint in general.
Mm-hmm. So basically, if you're good in one industry, you can probably adopt or apply some of those skills to the cannabis industry. I'm curious, after so many deals, Matt, what are you most proud of?
Which deal am I most proud of, or just
not necessarily a specific deal, but like you can be, but just professionally, what are you most proud of?
Yeah, I think I'll tell you what, we just hired a very, very talented individual to our team who we've worked with in the past on. He was an operator in one of our other companies, and now he basically heads up our whole underwrite and research, and he's a whiz kid too. And so when we hired him, he looked me in the eye and said, when I got into cannabis, my dream was to come to work for you guys. And so that really struck me, in a very positive way, obviously, but it was a little bit overwhelming. So, but it's that's obviously a good feeling when somebody tells you that. And I hope that we can, and that makes me not want to let him down, obviously. And having a full team is important to me. And we gotta ride the waves of uncertainty right now and kind of figure out this, not only Cannabis 2.0, but Entourage Effect Capital 2.0. And I think a lot of firms are doing that in the space right now. And I don't think anybody has concrete answers on what it's all going to look like.
No, they don't. And when you and your team look at opportunities, what are some of the most important factors you consider?
Management team, first and foremost, scalability, location, sector. That's probably a good starting point. But we've got a good partner in ArcView that's that our fund too is we're we own over half that company. And so, but that's basically our venture capital arm. And so all of our early stage stuff goes through them. And that leaves the parent firm to kind of go out and look at later stage opportunities.
Nice. So look at the management team, look at the scale, look at the market, pretty straightforward stuff. Matt, we're wrapping up, and I want to kind of conclude on a positive note. So what are you most optimistic about?
The fact that we haven't scratched the surface of what this industry can be, but yet it's arguably a $30 billion industry domestically. That's what really motivates me to keep at this. And because when it's all said and done, this could be hundreds of billions of dollars worth of revenue, when it's all legal. And we just have to keep our eye on the prize and work as hard as we can to convince the powers that be to help us get there sooner.
Well, powers that be, if you're tuning in, please heed Matt's advice. He's a smart gentleman. And for people out there who are interested in learning more about you, Entourage Effect Capital, they might have hundreds of billions of dollars they need to deploy. Where can they look to, Matt?
Well, you can come to me directly at mhawkins@eecpartners.com, or you can go to our website at eecpartners.com.
That's eecpartners.com. Of course, we'll include links to this. And Matt Hawkins, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
You bet, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Matt Balaker podcast. To learn more, please check out mattbalaker.com and encourage your friends to like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate it.